Lucas Vance had spent 10 years building a life he thought would make his parents proud, and it took exactly 4 seconds standing at the rusted gate of his childhood home to realize that pride had been built on a lie. He put the truck in park and sat there a moment longer than he needed to, the engine ticking as it cooled, his phone glowing on the passenger seat with the confirmation email still open, keys ready for pickup, Unit 4B, move in whenever you're ready, Mr. and Mrs. Vance. He'd signed the lease himself, chosen the apartment himself, walked through it twice to make sure the radiators worked and the windows didn't rattle in the wind, because after everything his parents had sacrificed for him and his brothers, the least he could do, the very least, was give them somewhere warm and easy to grow old in. He was 38 now, and Vance Construction had 6 crews working 3 counties, and he had done what he set out to do. He had made it. He had not come home in 10 years because home had always been a 4-hour drive and a business that never stopped needing him, but he had never once, not one single month, forgotten to send the money. That was the part he kept coming back to as he stared at the gate. It used to be white. Now it hung crooked on one hinge, orange with rust, and behind it the yard that his mother used to keep so carefully, rows of marigolds, a little vegetable patch, hydrangeas she babbied through every summer, was just dirt and dead stalks, brittle things bowing over like they were tired of standing. The porch light was out. A strip of newspaper had been folded and jammed into a gap in the front window where the frame had warped, the kind of fix his father would have scoffed at once, a man who used to replace a cracked tile the same day he noticed it. The paint on the front door had peeled into long curling strips, gray wood showing through like old skin. Lucas felt something drop in his stomach, cold and sudden, the kind of feeling he hadn't had since he was a kid watching his father's truck pull out of the driveway during the bad years, never sure if it was coming back that night. He told himself it was nothing. Old people let things go. His mother's knees weren't what they used to be. His father had never been the type to spend money on a paint job when the roof still held. He told himself this all the way up the cracked path, and by the time he reached the door his heart was going anyway, that traitor, and he pressed the doorbell and heard nothing. It was broken too, so he knocked, hard, the way you knock when part of you is afraid no one will answer. What answered him instead was a cough. It came from somewhere behind the door, deep and dry and long, the kind of cough that sounded like it was being dragged up out of a chest that had nothing left to give, one that doubled a person over, that you could hear straining for air at the end of it. Lucas stood frozen on the porch, keys to a brand new apartment heavy in his jacket pocket, and listened to his father cough like he was drowning on dry land. The door opened. Arthur Vance had always been a big man, not tall, but solid, the kind of build that came from 30 years running a machine shop, forearms like rope, a laugh that filled a room. The man who opened the door was wearing his father's flannel shirt, but he wasn't wearing his father's body. His face had collapsed in on itself, cheeks hollowed, skin gone the color of old paper and hanging loose at the jaw the way skin does when a person has lost weight too fast for too long. His eyes were the same, that was the only thing that hadn't changed, that same warm brown, but they sat in bruised hollows now, and it took him a second, blinking in the porch light, to understand who was standing in front of him. Lucas. His father said his name like he wasn't sure he was allowed to believe it. Dad. Lucas's voice cracked on the single syllable. He hadn't planned for it to. He'd rehearsed this reunion in the truck for the last hour of driving, the big hug, the tour of the new place, maybe tears, good ones, and none of it had prepared him for the way his father's hand trembled on the doorframe, for the way he had to catch his breath just from the effort of standing there. You look, Arthur started, and then the cough took him again, folding him half over, and Lucas was through the door and had a hand under his father's elbow before he even decided to move, holding him up while the fit passed, feeling how light he was, how there was almost nothing under the flannel but bone. Dad, when did you start coughing like that? It's nothing. Old man's lungs. Come in, don't just stand there letting the cold. The cold. Lucas stepped inside and understood, in the space of one breath, why his father was worried about the cold getting in. Because the house was cold. Not comfortable cold, not autumn cold, actually cold, the kind that lived in the walls, and Lucas realized with a lurch that he couldn't hear a furnace running anywhere. The smell hit him next. Dust, thick and settled, the smell of rooms that don't get opened. Under it, something sharper, the medicinal smell of eucalyptus rub and the flat metallic tang of old prescription bottles. The living room where he'd grown up doing homework at the coffee table was dim, curtains drawn against a daylight that cost nothing, furniture he remembered from childhood now sagging and threadbare. On the side table by his father's armchair sat a single mug, chipped along the rim, a spoon inside it crusted with the dried ring of something instant and cheap. Arthur. Who was that though? His mother's voice came from the kitchen, and then she appeared in the doorway, and Lucas had to grip the back of a chair to keep himself upright. Martha Vance had always moved through a room like she was in charge of it, that was how he remembered her, apron on, flour on her hands, laughing at something on the radio while she cooked enough food for 6 even when it was just the 5 of them. The woman in the doorway moved carefully, one hand trailing along the wall as if she needed it, and when she saw him her whole face opened up with a joy so pure and so immediate that for 1 second Lucas let himself believe everything was fine. Lucas. Oh, my boy. She came to him with her arms out, and he folded her into a hug and felt, through her cardigan, how her shoulder blades stood out like the edges of a shelf, how her hands, when they came up to hold his face, would not stop shaking, a fine, constant tremor she tried to hide by pulling them back quickly and tucking them into her sleeves. "Let me look at you," she said, stepping back, and her smile was so bright and so brave that it broke something in his chest more thoroughly than tears would have. "Look at this jacket. Look at you. Successful man. We're so proud, Lucas, we talk about you all the time, don't we, Arthur, we tell everyone." "Mom." He had to stop her. His voice came out rough. "Mom, what's going on here?" "What do you mean?" "Too quick. Too bright." "Nothing's going on. We're getting older, that's all, you know how it is. The house is freezing. Dad can barely breathe. When's the last time either of you saw a doctor?" "We're fine," Arthur said from the armchair he'd lowered himself into, a hand pressed flat against his own chest as if to hold something in place. "Don't fuss, son. Sit down, tell us about the business, tell us about." "I'm not sitting down." Lucas heard his own voice shaking now, matching his mother's hands. "I have an apartment for you. Brand new. Heated. 20 minutes from a hospital. I came here to bring you the keys, to take you both to see it, and instead I find," he gestured, helpless, at the room, at the cold, at the 2 people he loved most in the world wearing their own frailty like something they were ashamed of. "What happened? What happened to you two?" Martha's smile finally cracked. "Just at the edges." She looked at Arthur, and Arthur looked at the worn carpet, and in the silence Lucas heard the furnace not running, and the wind finding its way through the newspaper stuffed into the window frame, and his father's breath, wheezing faintly even at rest. "Sit down, Lucas," his mother said quietly, and this time it wasn't bright at all. He didn't sit. He walked further into the kitchen instead, some instinct pulling him there, and on the counter beside the sink he saw it, a plastic pill organizer, the kind with a compartment for every day of the week, and every single pill inside it had been cut in half. Not some of them. All of them. Little white crescents and yellow crescents, painstakingly divided, a razor blade sitting beside the organizer with a thin crust of dust on the handle like it hadn't been washed after its last use because there hadn't been time or energy to bother. "Why are the pills cut in half?" Lucas said. It wasn't really a question. His hands had gone cold. Martha appeared in the doorway behind him, and for a moment she said nothing. "They last twice as long that way," she finally said, and her voice was so small, so apologetic, as if she were confessing something shameful, that Lucas had to close his eyes. He reached for the dish towel folded over the edge of the counter, meaning only to wipe his hands, needing something to do with them, and underneath it he found a stack of envelopes. Overdue. Final notice, in red block letters, from the gas company. Final notice from the electric company. A collections letter with a phone number circled in shaky pen. A hospital bill, unpaid, the total circled too, 3 figures that made Lucas's stomach turn to ice, next to a note in his father's handwriting that just said not yet, and beneath all of it, folded so many times it had gone soft as cloth at the creases, a letter in his mother's handwriting, unaddressed, unsent, unstamped. He looked at her. She didn't stop him. Maybe some part of her had left it there for exactly this, for someone, someday, to find. He unfolded it. "My dear Lucas," it began, and Lucas had to sit down after all, right there at the kitchen table, because his legs had stopped being reliable. The letter wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. That was the worst part. His mother had never been a woman for drama, and even here, writing what he understood after 2 lines to be a confession of exactly how bad things had gotten, her handwriting stayed neat and careful, as if good penmanship might soften what the word said. She wrote about skipping meals so Arthur could have his medication. She wrote about the cough that had been getting worse for 8 months and the doctor visit they couldn't afford and kept postponing. She wrote, "I don't want you to worry, I know how hard you work," and then, 2 lines later, "Some nights I lie awake and I am so afraid," and Lucas realized his mother had written a letter describing her own slow starvation to her son and then had been too proud, too afraid, too something, to ever put it in an envelope and send it. "Mom." His voice didn't sound like his own. "You wrote this." It was a bad night. She wouldn't look at him. "I didn't mean anything by it. I never sent it. Things got better after that." "Did they?" He stood up so fast the chair scraped hard against the floor, and both his parents flinched, actually flinched, at the sound, and that flinch told him everything the letter hadn't. "Because from where I'm standing, Mom, nothing here looks better. Dad can't breathe. You can't hold your own hand still. There's a newspaper in the window because you can't afford to fix it. Pills cut in half. Bills that say final notice." His voice cracked wide open. "I sent money. Every single month for 10 years, I sent money home. Rent. Groceries. Medical. I set it up so it would never be late, not once. I made sure of that no matter how busy the business got, because I promised myself you two would never want for anything again after everything you gave up for us. So where did it go? Where is 10 years of money, if this is what you've been living in?" The silence that followed was the loudest thing Lucas had ever heard in his life. His father made a sound that wasn't quite a word, and then his mother made the same sound, and Lucas watched 2 people who had never, not once in his childhood, appeared weak in front of him, come apart at the kitchen table like something inside them had simply given out. "He told us," Arthur finally said, and had to stop, chest heaving, before he could go on. "He told us you were struggling too. That the business was in trouble. That you were sending what you could, but it wasn't ever what we thought it was. He said you'd asked him not to tell us how bad things had gotten for you, because you didn't want us to worry. He said," a cough tore through him, long and ugly, and Martha's hand went to his back, rubbing in small useless circles, her own hand shaking against his spine. "He said you'd forgotten us a little," Martha whispered, when Arthur couldn't finish. "Not out of cruelty. Just busy. Successful men get busy," he said. "He said we should be grateful for whatever little bit came through, and not make you feel bad by asking for more. He said if we called you, if we pushed, it might make things worse for you. So we stopped calling. We didn't want to be a burden." Her voice broke entirely on the word burden. "We were so proud of you, Lucas. We didn't want to be the thing that dragged you down. Lucas felt something in his chest go white hot and then very, very cold. Julian told you that. It wasn't a question, and his mother's silence was answer enough. He pulled his phone from his jacket pocket, hands steadier now than they had any right to be, some cold clean fury settling over the panic like ice forming over a river, and opened his banking app right there at the kitchen table. 10 years of transaction history, a tap away. He turned the screen toward his parents. This is every transfer I've made in 10 years. His voice had gone flat, controlled, the voice he used on job sites when something had gone badly wrong and yelling would only make it worse. Look at the amounts. Look at the memo lines: groceries, dad's meds, house payment, emergency fund. Look at who they went to. Martha leaned in, squinting, and Arthur leaned in beside her, and Lucas watched his father's paper-thin face go slack as he read the recipient name at the top of transfer after transfer after transfer, stretching back a full decade, 4 figures a month, sometimes more, always on time, never missed. Julian Vance. I never sent it to you two directly, Lucas said, and his voice cracked despite himself, because Julian told me, years ago, right after I moved for the business, that it was easier if it all went through him. That he was handling your finances, paying your bills directly, managing everything so you two didn't have to deal with paperwork or scams or bank visits you couldn't get to. I trusted him. He's my brother. I thought I was taking care of you. He had to stop and breathe. I thought I was taking care of you. Arthur's hand came up and covered his mouth, and above it his eyes had filled, and Lucas had never in his life seen his father cry, not once, not at funerals, not at anything, and the sight of it now broke something in him that he understood would never fully be repaired. 10 years, Arthur said, muffled behind his hand. 10 years he told us there was nothing more coming. 10 years we thought you'd left us behind, and we told ourselves it was all right, we told ourselves you'd earned your own life, we told each other not to be selfish. His shoulders shook. And the whole time you were sending. He couldn't finish. He didn't need to. Martha had gone very still, and very pale, and when she finally spoke her voice had dropped to something close to a whisper. Lucas. You need to be careful. Careful of what? Julian. She glanced toward the front window as if he might be standing right outside it. He isn't good with being confronted. If he thinks you're going to cut him off, if he thinks you know, she shook her head, quick and small. He gets angry. He's gotten angry before. Please, just, think about how you do this. How long has this been happening, Mom? She didn't answer right away, and that told him it had been the whole 10 years, start to finish, every month, every dollar, and something about watching his mother be afraid of her own son, afraid on Lucas's behalf, afraid of the consequences of the truth simply being spoken aloud, set the last of his composure on fire. What about Caleb? Lucas asked, thinking suddenly of his youngest brother, and the look that passed between his parents was answer enough before either of them spoke. Caleb visits sometimes, Arthur said carefully. When he needs something. Your mother's ring went to him 8 months ago, he said it was for a car repair, he'd get it back to us in a week. A humorless, broken sound that might once have been a laugh. We haven't seen the ring or the money since. There was the old radio set your grandfather left me. The good winter coats, the wool ones, he said he'd found a buyer, that he'd split it with us. He looked down at his own hands. We stopped keeping anything in the house worth pawning, is the truth of it. Not because we don't love him. Because we can't afford to love him and eat that same month. Lucas sat back in the kitchen chair his father had built 40 years ago, in a house that had been slowly, systematically hollowed out by 2 of his own brothers while he worked 80-hour weeks 4 hours away believing every check he sent was food on their table and heat in their bones, and he felt the picture complete itself with a horrible, clean click. Julian, controlling the money, spinning a story to Lucas about their parents' pride and Lucas's own fictional hardship, spinning the opposite story to their parents about a son too busy and too burdened to remember them, positioning himself as the devoted one, the present one, the good son, while quietly draining every dollar that came through his hands. Caleb picking at whatever scraps of value were left, a second parasite feeding off the same wound. And in the middle of it, two people who had worked their whole lives and raised 3 sons and asked for nothing, slowly starving in a cold house, too proud and too frightened to ever say the words out loud. Lucas stood up. He walked to the front hallway, where he'd left his jacket, and from the inside pocket he took the small manila envelope with the apartment keys, a rounded brass key and a fob for the building door, both still shining, both meant for a different homecoming than the one this had turned out to be, and he came back and set them on the kitchen table between his parents, deliberately, like laying down a card. "That's yours," he said. "Unit 4B, Maple Court. Heated, first floor, no stairs, 5 minutes from Baptist Memorial. I signed the lease under my name so there's nothing for anyone to touch, and I'll have movers here Monday morning if you want them, or we can pack together this weekend, whatever you need. But you're leaving this house. Today, if you want. Tonight, if you want. You are never spending another winter with newspaper stuffed in a window frame, and you are never cutting another pill in half, and you are never again wondering whether your own son forgot about you, because he didn't. He never did. Not for one single day in 10 years. Martha was crying now, silently, one shaking hand pressed to her mouth, and Arthur reached across the table and gripped Lucas's wrist with a strength that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his wasted body should have held. "And Julian?" Arthur asked, low. "Julian," Lucas said, "is about to learn what happens when you steal from the only 2 people in this family who never once asked anybody for anything." He took out his phone again, found the contact, Julian, still saved with a little brother emoji next to the name from years ago, a small cruelty he didn't have the heart to appreciate right now, and dialed, and set the phone on the table on speaker, and the 3 of them sat around it in the cold kitchen and listened to it ring. It picked up on the 4th ring, Julian's voice easy, warm, practiced. "Hey, big brother. Everything all right?" "I'm at Mom and Dad's," Lucas said. A beat of silence. "Just half a second too long." "Oh yeah? Didn't know you were coming into town. You should have told me, I'd have. I brought them keys to a new apartment, Julian. Heated, close to the hospital, all paid for. Do you know why I felt like they needed that?" "Lucas, I don't. Because Dad can barely stand up without coughing until he can't breathe, and Mom's hands shake so bad she can't hold a cup of coffee steady, and there's a newspaper jammed into the front window because nobody's fixed it in who knows how long, and every single pill in that house has been cut in half to make it stretch. That's why." The silence on the line this time was longer, and heavier, and Lucas could picture his brother's face doing whatever it did when a lie he'd been running for a decade started to buckle. "Look, things have been tight for everyone. I've been trying my best to help out where I can on top of my own. I have 10 years of bank transfers, Julian." Lucas kept his voice level, almost gentle, and somehow that was worse than shouting, he could tell by the way his brother's breathing changed on the other end of the line. "Every month. Rent. Groceries. Medical. Sent directly to you, because you told me that was easier for them. I have the dates. I have the amounts. I have the memo lines. And I have 2 parents sitting in a freezing kitchen who thought I'd abandoned them, because that's what you told them I did, while you told me they were too proud to accept more than the bare minimum." He let that sit a second. "You've been running a con on your own parents and your own brother for 10 years, Julian, and the 2 people who paid for it nearly starved doing it quietly so they wouldn't burden me. Lucas, you don't understand the whole. I understand every part of it." Something in Lucas's chest had gone from fire to something colder and far more final. "Here's what happens now. Mom and Dad are moving out today. I'm having every account, every bill, every piece of paperwork connected to their names pulled and reviewed by my accountant this week, and if 1 cent of what I sent for their care went anywhere other than their care, I am filing a police report, and I will make sure every relative, every family friend, every person at that church you still go to on Christmas knows exactly what you did. I'm not asking you to explain. I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm telling you what's happening. You are done having access to them. You are done having access to their money, their home, or their trust. If you show up at that new apartment, if you call them, if you so much as send a text asking for a favor, I will make sure that everyone who ever respected you learns precisely why they shouldn't. Do you understand me? There was a long silence, and then, quietly, stripped of all its earlier ease, Julian's voice came through the speaker sounding, for the first time in the call, like a person and not a performance. Lucas, please, just let me explain. I got into some debt a while back and I meant to pay it back. I was going to. You had 10 years, Lucas said, and ended the call. The kitchen was silent except for his father's breathing, ragged but steadier now somehow, as if some enormous weight had finally been set down. Martha reached out and took the apartment keys off the table, turning them over once in her trembling hand like she was checking that they were real, and then she started to cry in earnest, not the sad, careful crying she'd been doing, but something looser and more relieved, the kind of crying that comes after you've been holding your breath for a very long time and someone finally tells you it's safe to let it out. You're not a burden, Lucas said, kneeling by her chair, taking both her shaking hands in his and holding them still. You were never a burden. Not for one single day. I built that whole company thinking about the two of you every step of the way, and I am so sorry it took me 10 years to find out what was actually happening in this house. That's on me too. I should have come. I should have called more. I should have checked. But that's over now. From today, I'm not 4 hours away in my head anymore, whatever the map says. You're going to have heat and food and doctors and a phone number that goes straight to me, and nobody, not Julian, not Caleb, not anybody, is going to stand between us again. Arthur reached over and put a hand, thin but firm, on top of both of theirs. We're proud of you, he said, voice wrecked but steady. We always were. Every single day. I need you to know that never once stopped being true, no matter what he told us. I know, Dad. Lucas felt his own eyes finally give way, warm and unashamed. I know. They left the house that evening, the three of them, Lucas carrying out the few things his parents actually wanted to keep, his mother's good china, a box of photographs, his father's old toolbox with the dents in the lid from 40 years of honest work, while the last light went orange and then blew over the dead marigolds in the yard. Martha paused at the gate and looked back once at the house that had held both the whole of her marriage and the worst of her son's betrayal, and then she turned around and did not look back again. By the time they pulled into the lot at Maple Court, the sky had gone fully dark, and the windows of Unit 4B glowed warm and gold through the curtains Lucas had picked out weeks ago without knowing exactly what they'd mean by the time his parents saw them. He carried his father's arm over his shoulder up the single, easy step at the entrance, no stairs to climb, no cold to fight through, and when he opened the door the heat rolled out to meet them, and his mother made a small sound in her throat, disbelieving and grateful all at once, as she stepped into a home that was, for the first time in a decade, exactly as safe and warm as her son had always believed it to be. That night, after they'd eaten a real meal at a real table and his father had fallen asleep sitting upright in a soft chair with color slowly returning to his face, Lucas sat by the window with his mother, the two of them quiet, watching the lights of the city his money had helped build glimmer beyond the glass. It's over, she said finally, more to herself than to him. It's over, Lucas agreed, and for the first time in 10 years, he believed the house he'd left behind that morning, cold, broken, full of half-cut pills and unsent letters, would finally, truly, be someone else's problem to answer for, and never his family's to survive again.